Hello and welcome. I'm Nancy Sheed of Sheed Communications. I'm very excited to be here today with Alex Jamieson and Bob Gower. They are partners and co-authors of a fantastic new book called Radical Alignment. And if you've been around before, we chatted with them. But I think I look back and it was, I don't know, 18 months or a couple of years ago. And could it have been that long ago? 2018, right?
That sounds crazy, but sounds right. Yeah.
So when we first met, and this is kind of a catch up with their writing journey, their author journey, and their book journey. But before we dive into that, I'd love it, Alex and Bob, if you could just sort of catch us up on your backgrounds in terms of who you are and who you're working with these days, in addition to being published authors.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, I'm Alex. I've been a coach mainly for women for 20 years. I started as a health coach and a natural foods chef, and kicked off my career making the movie or the documentary Super Size Me. And that transitioned through 3 books and 10 years into kind of women's empowerment and then women's business confidence leadership coaching. So that is what I do now. I work mainly with women leaders who work either in tech sales, or they're very entrepreneurial in corporate, or they're entrepreneurs and they decide that they want to use creativity as a main leadership style, and still weaving in all the old good stuff. But along the way, about halfway through all that, I met Bob. And we created and came up with a really fantastic communication tool that we'll talk about in a minute, that became our latest book together.
Okay, dun, dun, dun. Now we're hanging in suspense. And now to Bob.
Yeah, so I started off my career as a newspaper designer, which I feel like makes me sound terribly old. It's like I made, I worked on horse and buggy or something like that, or delivered ice, like that's kind of what it sounds like these days. But I was the design director at the San Francisco Examiner, as well as at different weekly papers in the Bay Area for many years, and then transitioned along with everybody else into the web, when that went sort of web publishing, and worked on early incarnations of MSNBC.com. We built the first version of the U.S. Senate's website. We did a lot of stuff for HBO in the early days. And we made a ton of mistakes, moving from sort of print media into interactive media. I then went back to school and got an MBA focused on sustainable business. So looking at business as the social impact as well as the environmental impact of business, and became really fascinated with management philosophy. And that had me move into product management in Silicon Valley. And I became obsessed with something called agile software development, which is kind of like lean theory as applied to complex systems like computer systems, and building software products in Silicon Valley. And then that had me move more into how people treat each other and how people work together and collaborate in order to be creative, in order to be ethical, and in order to create sort of positive organizational cultures. And so for the last 5 or 6 years, my work has been primarily focused on coaching and facilitating leadership teams and boards of all kinds of companies. I've really transitioned recently to doing a lot more nonprofit work, though I still, I work across industries, but I'll spend a lot of time with nonprofit boards and leadership teams and different kinds of organizations, kind of helping them be better teams.
Okay, I think I only knew the second half of that story. I don't think I knew the whole cart and buggy ice magazine wet. So if our work here is done, just to have heard that piece of the story. Thank you, Bob and Alex, for sharing that. So we met because, which you're going to allude to, Alex, you had this great idea for a book, or you had this great concept that was working that I'll let you sort of explain. It moved to a book idea, and it was the first time you all had both worked together, right?
Yeah.
By design.
Yeah.
We were pretty explicit. When we got together, I guess later in life for me. You were still young. Anyway, I don't want to age anybody but myself. But it was like, I think we had both had relationships which had combined work and intimacy or romance and not necessarily gone super well. So when we got together, we were like, we're not going to work together. We're just going to build a life and build a home and raise a child together. And then this idea, when it came around, we resisted it and then finally heeded the call.
People kept asking for what we had.
Yeah, we were like, we have to do it, and we need to do it together. So.
And for those who like aren't familiar with your, I mean, for lack of a better, when I met you, it was the IB.
ICBD.
Yeah. Okay. And it's now, it slightly has a different name of the all-in method, but you kind of had this secret sauce, this secret recipe, as Alex just alluded to, that you were being asked to share. And, but it wasn't just in your personal, I mean, it wasn't just personal relationships, Bob, right? Like, I think that's what has been so interesting in following with this. This was kind of it worked at home, but it worked at work, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was something that we had developed or just kind of used for our own personal relationship for a long time. And then, in my consulting work, I work with a lot of teams of consultants. And then also we would work with our clients. And often the work we were doing was pretty nuanced and pretty difficult. It was, organizational change work is never easy and never straightforward. And we really needed to build trust and empathy and psychological safety all very quickly. And so I started just bringing this method in, and it really wasn't a method at that point. It was just like a series of questions that we would ask each other. And then people kept coming back. I think we didn't really think of it as much. Like, it wasn't like we said, here's this perfect method and we're going to create this method. It was more like, here are these questions that we always ask before we do difficult things together. I'm going to use this in my professional life. We're going to use it in my personal life. And then people just sort of kept asking us for it. So we finally decided, like, let's not have to explain it over and over again, because as you just demonstrated, it's 4 steps. And for some reason, 4 steps are hard to remember. Like ICBD, everybody kind of always got it wrong. We weren't really great at explaining it in the early days. And so we created a Google Doc that we could point people to. And that's what became the book that we met you over. Yeah.
I love that. And so it was just a Google Doc. And then at one point, the light bulb goes, okay, it's a Google Doc. At what point did you sort of say, let's make this into a book? Did you say it to yourselves, or again, did you get knocked over the head with people saying, why isn't this a book? You should write a book.
It was both. It took us a while to come to the realization that it was worthy of really expanding, because people kept asking for it. I mean, friends and client, I was teaching it to my one-on-one coaching clients, and they were giving me such great feedback. Bob was using it more and more in his work. And at a certain point, we toyed with the idea, like, maybe this is a thing. But again, we were so hesitant to do something in our marriage that was also professional. And I had written several books before. Bob had written a book before. And we know it can be a stressful, big piece of work to bring into a relationship. So we were just like, do we want to do that to ourselves? But it just became so clear that I'm really pulled by, is this serving people? Is something really helping? And this was really helping people. Yeah. So I was like, oh, and our friend Rebecca Barucki.
I was going to say.
Who, a dear friend of mine who I taught the method to, she took it home. She ran with it. She's got 5 kids. She and her husband are both entrepreneurs and artists. And she's like, Alex, this saved my marriage. It has changed the way my entire family talks to each other. You have to write this as this needs to be out there. So it was that push also that got us to do it.
Well, in that third party and that endorsement and testimonial that you needed as well. So that's a perfect. I'm glad. Thank you, Rebecca, for doing that. Like, we're very glad she did that. But that brings us to. When we met, you all had a very specific plan, that you weren't on a traditional path. You were sort of, let's craft this and walk through the thinking, back to your point, Alex, about being of service. You all were very intentional with what you wanted to do with it when we met. Yeah.
I wanted it to be short. We liked that it could be a short 90-minute read. Mm-hmm. Again, we've both published books before, and I was like, I don't want to wait 2 years to go through the whole pitch and write and process. Like, I just don't want to wait, and I don't want it to have to be this 350-page thing. Let's just do it ourselves. We can do this. So that was the initial thought.
Yeah, I think we both sort of, we were both. You were raised by hippies in Oregon, and I was a late stage hippie, aspiring. But I think in like pre-internet days, I used to really think of books as tools, right? And my library was so important to me, and books had a purpose, right? Like you're going to garden, you're going to find your book, and it's going to talk about gardening. I was a carpenter, I was a furniture maker. Books really, really were tools that helped me do things. And I think the orientation I always had towards this, I don't know if we've ever even talked about this, but was that this book was a tool that did a specific job. And so the idea was not to kind of have a big fluffy, I feel like, most of the books that I read, probably you could trim out half the stuff, for me anyway, like I don't need, or this, sometimes I get through a book and I'm like, this could have been a good article, and I really, and it probably was a good article that someone got a book deal because it was a good article, that kind of thing, which no fault, no foul, like I don't, no harm, no foul. I don't really worry about that. But I didn't want to do that with this book. I wanted this book to be a tool that could really help people improve their relationships, both at work and at home. And so we probably wrote 3 times as much as actually made it into the final book, because we kept kind of going back through it, and we're like, wait a minute, is this really required if people are going to just use the tool? Like we just want people to come to it with like, I have a difficult conversation I need to do. How do I approach this difficult conversation? So let's trim out everything that doesn't help them do that. And we realized at least I thought we were writing a lot of marketing fluff kind of stuff early on. Not that there's anything wrong with marketing fluff, but yeah.
No, it sounds like you were great. You were already a great editor for yourself, and you didn't have to have somebody come in and say, okay, your baby's great, but like it needs a whole lot of work. It sounds like you were, and in it, you also had each other, right? So this wasn't you going off into a cabin in the woods to write this, right? And also it is your life's work in a way, but it's to your point that it was a tool, it was a manual, right? I think that has a different feel to it when you're writing from that perspective. I love that. But the other thing I wanted to sort of also point out, but not only were you all clear that you wanted to do it yourself, you wanted to give it away, and I thought you were crazy, right? But you're like, no. So can you talk to that? Because that is not the normal path, even for people who know they aren't going to make money on a book. They still want to maybe at least recoup their losses, right? So that is not the path you all were interested in going. What was your thinking in that?
I think it was that, as you said, or alluded to there, book writing is not necessarily the path to riches. Actually, we were just talking to a friend of ours. We were just on his podcast who wrote a book as well that actually features our methodology. It was the first place our methodology appeared in print. Somebody I used to work with. Anyway, and he said, like a book is a great lottery ticket. Like it's not, like there are some books that make tons of money, but most books just don't make any. But that doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile. Books are, like just saying so-and-so wrote the book, like that adds a certain air of mystique, or at least it shows that people can finish projects. Like people have some kind of stick to it. But more than that, we just thought the methodology was so valuable that why not just get it into as many hands as we possibly can? And at the end of the day, publishing a book is not, like the writing, the editing, the design, we all had, those are commodities in a certain way. The printing is certainly a commodity, like it's just not that expensive to get a book, right, kind of out into the world. And so we're like, let's just get it out in the world and get it into as many hands as possible. That's where it's going to really do our businesses good. And
I love that. And you launched it was great. And you got this product out in the world. It was a co-product. I think for literally an email address, or whatever, you grew this amazing fan base of people, as well as from your businesses being able to point to it. So, talk me through how this is out there. It's out there, you're sharing it in the world. You're getting great feedback, right? And then were you looking for the traditional deal, or did somebody come knocking on your door? Like, this is the fun part of the story that I'd like love to hear. And I think people need to know there's no one path.
Well, I think knowing how to launch a book, even knowing how to launch a self-published book is important. That's an important piece of the story. And because, I had been with traditional publishers
Right.
4 times before, I knew the basics of how to launch a book. I was like, all right, we need to get this book up to number 1 in a category on Amazon when we self-publish. And, getting all of your friends who have email lists to promote it. So the pre-sales, blah, blah, blah. So we knew how to do that. So we had a really decent launch with this self-published book. And then Bob was actually doing a speaking training and met the head of Sounds True Publishing while he was out in Colorado at this big event. He was up on stage, he was giving this great talk. He met the publisher and he could say, look, we self-published this book and we got it up to number 1 on Amazon. And she was like, oh, well, that's impressive. And that started the conversation as far as I remember.
Yeah. And I think, the way publishers work, they see, I think they looked at it and they were like, well, you've already written a lot of it, like we expanded it. So the new version of the book is a much deeper sort of examination of the topic. And it's probably 3 times as long as the initial book. Right. So it's not just the tool, but it's also sort of, and we had been out in the market for a while and we realized like, oh yeah, there are these other things that kind of really help you use it better. And then we also have in the front of the book, like a how to use this book. So it's like, hey, if you're ready for it, just skip to this part, just go right to the meat. But I think they saw that the book was largely done in a lot of ways, right? That there was something there. Also that we had email addresses, we had something of a following, for people to sell it into. And so, we just started talking to them. I liked her. You liked her. And we were, and then we were like, well, should we go back to our, an agent that we know that Alex has used a few times? We're like, well, should we go back to our agent and should we now shop this around? Now that we realize there's appetite for this in the market, maybe let's shop it around. And we were like, no, that's too much trouble.
The path of least resistance.
We like these.
It was on offer.
We like these people. It's on offer. And really, again, for us, the benefit was getting the muscle of a traditional publisher and distribution, right? So getting it into more hands, you get a little bit more of a, what do you call it? Like a pedigree or, like a stamp of approval when you have an actual publisher. And we like Sounds True. Like we thought Sounds True, like we thought there was brand alignment, right? Essentially.
Totally. If you're just joining us or if you're just catching in, I'm Nancy Sheed of Sheed Communications. I love working with writers and authors, so I'm thrilled to be here with 2 co-authors, Alex Jamieson and Bob Gower. And we're talking about how they took their self-published book to traditional publishing. But if you look, I was about to literally say how to get the right publishing deal for your book, right? And so I had all these questions of like, what questions did you ask of your traditional publisher? So were there some, it sounds like you went through that checklist in your head, right? Like branded, we're not going to have to do a lot of work. You already had the platform and you were in alignment with your content. Was there anything else like when you made that decision?
2 things came up. One was a good thing we did and one was a mistake we made. We did have a lawyer look at the contract for us. Like we didn't have an agent. We decided not to bring my agent in. So it's like, it's a really standard deal. Like there's nothing to negotiate. Let's go for it. We had a lawyer look at it who was experienced. Like, he had been a literary agent himself, so he could look at it and walk us through that easily.
Yeah.
Right.
But one thing we did learn was that when the book was coming out, we were like, oh, we want the audiobook rights for this. Like we want to put this out because the market for audiobooks has changed so much since my last book came out.
Such a good point.
That, there's actually a lot of opportunity to make long-term profit from the audiobook. So we ended up buying the rights back and recorded it ourselves right here. And
during COVID lockdown. Yeah. Yeah. Actually the book, and I think it's even another point is that we realized that the contract actually did not stipulate that an audiobook would be produced. In other words, they had the rights,
But
and they had the right to sell the rights, but they had no obligation to make the audiobook. And that was a complete miss for us during the negotiation phase. We just assumed, which you should never do, obviously. And so, and then as we were looking at the economics of the, they were putting the audio rights out to auction at the London book show.
London Book Fair.
Yeah. Like right when COVID hit, like I think it actually got canceled because of COVID or something. Like it was really like right in March when it was all sort of going down. And so we found out what they were, what it was going to bring in auction. We're like, well, we'll pay that. Like we can make that back.
Right.
With some Audible bounties along with some, modest sales, we'll make back the investment very, very quickly. And so it becomes now it becomes actually a product line for us. It becomes something that's kind of interesting for us to make some money off of. Yeah.
I was going to say, and you're already set up in your studio. And I think, again, that brings a whole nother level. A, it's your own book, but two, the two different voices, because I know at the very beginning of this project, you were both concerned about, yes, this was your co-project, but you as yourselves are two different brands, and you yourselves are two different personalities, and you yourselves are known for two different. So I think what a wonderful way to bring this book literally to life, right? In terms of being able to hear you talk about it. So I bet you've gotten, I would assume, fantastic responses from there are some books that just lend themselves naturally, and I could see this being one of them.
Yeah, I actually read my last book. I did the reading for the Simon & Schuster book I did. And Bob is, I don't know if you can tell, but he has an incredibly rich voice.
Well,
he did acting training. So it's like, we can do this. Let's just
totally.
Because I prefer it when the author reads the book.
Totally.
Unless there's some crazy vocal thing going on you can't listen to for very long.
Yeah. Totally.
So it was a nice way to personalize it.
Yeah. I just listened to a book where the author or the writer, the person reading it didn't understand the topic at all. And so he's like spelling out acronyms that are always spoken as words, like
right.
EBITDA, and like then the business IDEO, the design bit, he spelled IDEO, the design, and I was just like, this is so this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Naughty. The publisher let that one go out. That's
yeah. I don't know. I need to review it on Amazon.
I wanted to say one other thing about going from the self-published skinny version to the bulked up version. One of the reasons why I wanted to do it, because at first I was like, no, let's make it a 90-minute read. And then we had an opportunity to really flesh it out. We had so many more stories to share about people who had used the method now to plan weddings or to change their family communication or on their teams at work. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have to include these stories. Yeah. They're incredible. And one of the things we included in the new book, which people love and all the reviews love it, is there's all these scripts now in the book about how to use the method, and people love that.
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because having seen it in its first version, and one of the big sort of cruxes or struggles when we were talking about it was the bringing the business and the personal together, right? Like in your head, you'd seen it work, but in the book, it still had more of that manual feel, and it would feel like it would go back and forth between those examples. And it was a little, we can say it now because it's all out and different, but it's a little bit stark, right? So I think that totally, I was so excited with the new version, to see that, because it did a wonderful job of smoothing the transitions in your examples as well, right? Does that make sense in terms of, it didn't seem like this is personal, this is work. It just kind of, you did a great job of integrating the situation into the point you were trying to make.
Yeah, I mean, that you're speaking to the essential struggle of this book, was just kind of two different ones. One was blending our voices,
right?
Because we both work, like I'll coach, I coach individual executives. Alex, coaches, women who are, in their work environment and has gone into businesses as well. So we don't, it's not like Alex is personal and I'm business. It's like we're both kind of a little bit in each other's worlds, but mostly in one world or the other. And then we both have our own writing style. We both have our own, way we use vocabulary. We both have our own, And so kind of blending all of that and positioning the book was really, as you know, right? Because you helped us work through this, right?
No,
Do you position it as self-help, or do you position it as business? And they're radically different positions, right? So,
well, exactly. And I think, but when I was thinking about introducing you both, I think you all tend to break the rules and do things a little bit differently or ask a question. And so you literally did that in the way you approached your book and the way you covered the content, and as well as the way you ended up with the traditional book deal. You didn't go the traditional route. So to me, the whole process was totally on brand for the way you approach most of the stuff you do as well.
Yeah.
And so the book is out, you got the Audible, you learned your lessons. And I mean, it's not as though you're first time authors, but I think this one, because it has that manual feel, or it has that tool feel to it, right? Can you each speak to sort of how you're now using that? Like, how is it being incorporated in the real world for you, for your businesses, or for your clients? Are you giving it away, or, talk to that a little bit if you could.
So I'm actually using the method, and this is actually a pretty recent realization for me, because most of the women I work with who, they're definitely leaders in their life and in their work, but a lot of my work with them is around their imposter syndrome or their inner fraud police, the lack of confidence, or the lack of, the fear of being found out, not being good enough at whatever it is that they're doing. And so I've been using values work, like helping people get clear about their personal values and how that is a great antidote to imposter syndrome. But how do you then take the values work into action in the world?
Right.
Well, it turns out imposter syndrome to values to what we now call the all-in method, this conversation tool, is how you use it with people to actually then change how you relate, how you act, how you plan, everything.
So there's theory, mindset, theory, right? You've shifted the assumptions and the theory, but the all-in method is helping you bring it into then sort of practice, right?
Yeah.
Are you using it in terms of a prerequisite for people to work with you, Alex? Is that or are people finding you because they read the book and go, oh, I need to work with Alex. She gets me. She speaks my language.
Well, so this is something every author should think about when they're writing a book, especially nonfiction. Like, God bless the fiction writers out there. I don't know how you do it, but for us,
I agree.
We really thought about how is this book going to then lead people to work with us? It's like a heavy business card here, come work with me now that you've read this. So since the book came out, we've been doing teachings and trainings all over the place for companies, for nonprofits. And so getting to demonstrate and share with them what the all-in method does for them in their lives and in their work is a perfect enough people are like, oh, that was really good. And I get to watch you do it.
Right.
So then they come connect with us about more consulting or coaching work.
That's awesome. And I know you've done the one-on-one, but when we last spoke, Alex, you were talking about how you were kind of going in one-to-many, which, Bob, I think was where the world you came in from, but you just alluded that you're sometimes doing now more one-on-one at a different level. Is that what I'm hearing in terms of how your work is evolving with this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been an interesting journey, launching a book, and I should also give, the virus some credit here as well, and some other, changes in the world and changes in my business and the kind of the needs of the business world and the tone of the business world right now. But, my work was often about, so I was, an organization designer and also worked as part of strategy teams. So that was kind of the work that I did for many years. And so our work product was a organizational like a reorganization for a company, or a strategy product for a company, right? So we would help them, and we worked very collaboratively. And so the kind of the method and the all-in method, and also sort of the facilitative and coaching kind of stance, that was a stance that I took and kind of a stance that I owned in the context of this larger work. what's happened with the book is, and also I think what's happened with the way the world has changed a little bit, is that it's given me an opportunity to rethink both what it is that I really care about, like what I really want to do, and also given me the opportunity to reposition myself a little bit. And so now this thing that was the way I approached the work, like, so I would be part of a team and I would be the guy who was working, doing the team development stuff along with the strategists, along with analysts, along with other people. Now I'm more selling my portion of it. The work, organizations see the value. They, because they're working remotely now, they see, team breakdowns just are so much more obvious, and people are like, oh my God, we need our team to work more close, more closely together. We need it to be a more developed team. And it's also allowed me to really think through, I think as you do it, right, as you write a book and as you comb through material again and again, and as Alex said, as you hear stories from people who are using the methodology, like I find myself like understanding in a more nuanced way almost every month. I have a new realization, like, wait a minute, oh, this is where it could be really valuable, and this is why, and this is even how I can sort of streamline what I'm doing in a way so I can get to the essence and I can get to the value delivery really, really quickly, rather than have sort of the ancillary things that sit around it. So it's really changed, I think, the way that I think about my work. And yes, I'm doing more individual coaching, but usually in the context of teamwork and team development. So I'll coach a team leader, and sometimes I will coach their lieutenants as well. And sometimes then I will also facilitate for them. So it's sort of a, kind of a combined, delivery.
And what I'm also hearing, maybe from a different standpoint, just from, if you think of the book, like it's living and breathing, right? Like it's, you are giving it this sort of evolving life, that's serving you personally, that's serving your clients personally, but it's gone well beyond the book, So to Alex's point, it's the calling card, but in the same way, it's almost sounding like it's the launch pad for a lot of different, whether we say lines of business, but also, deeper work, so to speak. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think actually I didn't tell you, the page is live today, the new homepage for our site. So, so also right after the book launched, again, because of sort of changes in the market, and also, a business partner of mine, a longtime strategy partner of mine, she took a job as CEO of a company. And so, I had to reevaluate whether or not to partner with either other people I partner with, or to kind of break off and do my own thing. And I had to really rethink, like, how many, like, what brand do I operate under, And so the fact that I had the book, I realized, working with my coach and working with, with Alex, that was like, oh, the book is the thing, like the book is the thing that people know me for now. And so now Radical Alignment is becoming its own real brand. And so we just went live with a new page today, and a set of service offerings that kind of sit around it. And then my personal site, bobgower.com, has been, it just sort of, it's atrophying. I'll probably redirect a lot of the stuff back towards Radical Alignment, but it creates.
We were talking about that a few years ago. I remember having that conversation about that beautiful site, but well, perfectly timed. I mean, in terms of, I'll put all the links in here, but I love hearing it from the both of you, because following you both in social media, right? So that's the other piece that's been fun, is seeing both of your lenses through which you are promoting this content. That's, and again, it's not off-brand at all. It's almost like the two cheerleaders of this awesome content, with, and also watching the two of you kind of be collaborative or giving shout outs for then the things that you do well apart, right? It's just been really fun to watch how it's not just a go see my wife, she does great things and Bob does great things, that there's a part that's actually, that's a both of you, that's been fun to be on the journey with as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, at least it looks like that in the online world.
Yeah. I think it's true. I'm just glad to hear that it's resonating accurately.
Like on occasion I'll see, Alex's artwork on Bob's page, or I'll see Bob quotes on Alex's page. And again, we can understand that you're helping each other amplify your platforms, but there's it's done it feels like in a thoughtful way, and that what you're sharing of Bob's to your audience, Alex, resonates, and vice versa, right? Like it doesn't just seem like honey, go post this, honey, go post that, or hand this off to our social media people. And it's also different. That's, I guess the other thing I'd say is it's not, I'm not seeing the same thing on both, right? Like it's thoughtful in its approach.
Well, we don't have social media people. We are.
We are, and yeah,
there you go.
So much better at it than I am, but yeah, and I think you're also speaking to something which sort of came through in the collaborative act of writing the book together, is that we figured out, kind of a shared voice. Like we each have individual voices, and then we also figured out this kind of blended voice. And I think, I don't know about you, but for me, like my voice and the way I understand my work and the way I understand, like even the next writing that I want to do or the next kinds of projects that I want to do is very much informed by Alex. She has had a big impact on me in terms of really, really thinking through, everything from just giving me tools. Like she was doing the Artist's Way, and all of a sudden now I'm doing, I don't know if you know the Artist's Way, but now all of a sudden, like the Artist's Way, I couldn't live without it now. Like it's just sort of this tool, which is so central to the way I now think about the world and think about my work. So it's going to be as sort of like concrete as that to a sort of abstract and just sort of me understanding the value and the benefit of the work that I do in new ways, and being able to have that kind of reflection, I think is really valuable. So I don't know how you feel about it, but I think our collaboration is super valuable.
I agree.
That makes three of us, and that's a nice note to end on. It's a treat, as always, to speak with both of you. Thank you for your time. So it sounds like if I'm sharing links to find you, the Radical Alignment book is the best way to learn more about the book.
Yeah, getradicalalignment.com is the new URL. The old one still goes there, still redirects there, but getradicalalignment.com is the place. And we've got all sorts of free tools, and you can find the book.
Oh my gosh, Bob made the most amazing team toolkit. It's so good. I was like, oh my, this needs to be its own book. What he created as the opt-in is ridiculous.
And it's free.
Yeah, get it.
Okay, I've seen this path before. I know where this leads. Watch this space. They're going to be back in a year or two. Well, part 3. Anyway, thank you both so much for your time. We'll put the links in where you can find Alex and Bob and have more questions. But this has been fantastic. I really love chatting with you both. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Nancy.